They say the most dangerous moments don't feel dangerous at all. No warning, no loud noise, just silence. A small moment that changes everything. It's been 3 years since that conversation. And I still think about it. Still replay it in my head. Over and over. The way he looked at me. The way he spoke. The way I felt afterward, confused, seen, unsettled. It was just a conversation. That's what I kept telling myself. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Mark, my dad's friend. I grew up around him. He was always there, laughing loud, cracking jokes, acting like a second uncle. But that day, he looked at me differently. Like he saw something no one else did. Like I wasn't just my father's daughter anymore. It threw me off. He didn't say anything inappropriate. Not at first. He was kind, warm, attentive. And I needed that. I was in a place where I was craving something, connection, validation, anything that made me feel like I mattered. When he asked if we could talk in private, I didn't hesitate. I wish I had. Because after that moment, everything changed. Not on the outside. No one else noticed. But inside me, something shifted. And I've never looked at myself, or him, the same way again. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold. Some truths don't fade. They follow you. It was summer. The kind of summer that makes you restless. Too quiet, too slow. The air heavy, like it's holding something back. And my room, God, my room felt more like a cage than comfort. Same posters on the wall. Same bed I cried into after high school heartbreaks. I'd been gone for 5 years. Now I was back, like nothing had changed, except everything had. I'd just come off a breakup that wrecked me. For years with someone who promised forever, only to leave me on a Thursday without even fighting for it. 2 weeks later, I lost the job I thought would be my new beginning. I packed my life into boxes and came back to the house I swore I'd never return to. That alone should tell you where I was emotionally. I was exhausted. Not just tired, but soul-deep worn out. I was in this weird space where nothing felt real and everything felt heavy. I tried to stay quiet, not cause trouble. My dad liked it that way. My mom just floated through the days, always busy but never present. And I was invisible. Again. Dad, Robert, is one of those men who doesn't really do emotions. He's not cruel. But he's not warm either. He believes in order, structure, and keeping things beneath the surface. I don't remember the last time he hugged me without it being awkward. We coexisted. He paid the bills. I stayed out of the way. Mom, Julia, is sweeter, but distant in a different way. She means well. She always has. But she's the type who will ask if you're okay while looking at her phone. She makes you tea when you're crying but doesn't sit with you long enough to listen. Her love is indirect. The house was always quiet. Not peaceful. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that presses in on you when you're already feeling small. And then there was him. Mark. My dad's best friend since they were teenagers. He was around before I could even walk. I used to call him Uncle Mark when I was little until I grew old enough to realize we weren't actually related. After his divorce, he started coming around more often, at least once or twice a month. He was part of the furniture, part of the family in a way that made no one question his presence. He was in his early 50s, but he looked good for his age. Always dressed neat, smelled like expensive cologne. He had this calm way of speaking that made you lean in without realizing it. He wasn't loud like some men my dad knew. He was steady, confident without being overbearing. I used to admire that. Maybe I still do. Growing up, I never paid much attention to him. He was just another adult. But now that I was older, back in that house, raw and searching for something, I noticed things I hadn't before. The way he listened when I talked. The way he remembered small things I'd said in passing. The way his eyes lingered a second longer than they probably should have. I told myself it was nothing. Just kindness. Familiarity. He'd known me since I was a kid, after all. But there was something else. Attention. Quiet, unspoken, but real. That day at the barbecue, it started small. He smiled at me across the yard. A look that wasn't just friendly. It was curious. Like he was seeing me for the first time as more than just Robert's daughter. And the thing is, I saw him too. Not just my dad's friend. Not just a familiar face. But a man. A man who noticed me. A man who didn't look at me with pity or disappointment. Just interest. It caught me off guard. And I should have brushed it off. Should have reminded myself of the boundaries. But I didn't. I let the moment linger. Because it felt good. And I hadn't felt good in a long time. Later that evening, after the guests had eaten and the laughter faded, I was sitting on the porch swing. Alone. I remember the sound of the crickets, the dull hum of conversation still floating from the kitchen. And then I heard the door open behind me. Mark stepped out. He didn't say much at first. Just stood there, holding a glass of something in his hand. Then he asked if he could sit. I nodded. That's when he said it. You've grown into someone really remarkable. Simple words. But they landed like thunder in my chest. I laughed nervously. Tried to brush it off. But he didn't laugh with me. He just looked at me. Quiet. Focused. Serious. In that moment, I felt two things at once, flattered and afraid. Because I knew something had shifted. And there was no going back. I remember exactly what I was wearing that day. A pale blue sundress, soft cotton, flowy, comfortable. It wasn't revealing. It wasn't meant to be anything. Just easy. The kind of thing you throw on without thinking. But he noticed. When Mark walked through the gate, he had that same confidence he always did. Sunglasses, button-down shirt rolled at the sleeves, casual smile like he owned the space without trying. Everyone greeted him like he was family. Because he was. In all the unspoken ways that matter. He looked at me, just for a second, and smiled. Not wide. Not loud. Just slow. Like he was acknowledging something he hadn't before. I looked away. I told myself I imagined it. Later, we sat around the patio table playing cards, some light game Dad always liked to bring out at family gatherings. Everyone was laughing, teasing, passing drinks around. I was between sips of lemonade when Mark leaned toward me, his voice low enough that only I could hear. You always seemed like you saw more than you let on. That's what he said. Just that. And it hit me in a way I wasn't prepared for. I didn't even know how to respond. I laughed quietly, a little nervously. Said something dumb like, "That's a weird thing to say," hoping it would break whatever was starting to settle in the air between us. But he didn't backpedal. He just looked at me, level, calm, and nodded, like he meant it. And then he went back to the game like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just said something that would follow me the rest of the day. It wasn't flirtatious. Not really. It wasn't sexual. But it was personal. And it was intentional. After dinner, everyone scattered. Mom went inside to handle dishes. Dad and a couple of the guys were still at the grill, nursing beers and telling stories they'd all heard 100 times. I needed air. I stepped onto the back porch, sat on the swing again. The same spot from earlier. I was fiddling with my phone, pretending to scroll, pretending not to think about him, when I heard the door creak open. He didn't say anything at first. Just stood near the door. Then slowly walked over. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. I nodded. And then there we were again. Just me and him. Only this time, the sun was lower. The light was softer. The air cooler. Quieter. The kind of quiet that makes you feel exposed. We didn't talk for a minute. Just sat. Then he said, casually, like it was nothing, "You always looked like you had one foot in and one foot out. Even when you were a kid." I turned toward him, unsure if it was meant to be a compliment or an observation. I asked him what he meant. He shrugged. Like you were always watching. Like you saw things no one else did. That's not a bad thing. Just rare. I didn't know why it made me feel the way it did. But it did. It made me feel seen. Not in that superficial, "you look nice today" kind of way. But in that deep, unsettling way, like someone reached in and touched something I thought was hidden. I told him he was reading too much into it. He smiled. Maybe. Or maybe you just never had anyone say it out loud before. There it was again, that feeling. That slow, sinking warmth that made my stomach twist and my chest tighten. It was harmless. It was just talk. Just words. But it didn't feel harmless. It felt like something was shifting. Like a line had been drawn in the sand, and now he was waiting to see if I'd step over it. I didn't say much else. Just nodded. Stared out into the yard like I was deep in thought. Truth was, my head was spinning. I felt flattered. Confused. Curious. Because someone finally saw me. And that someone was my father's friend. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, the soft hum of the ceiling fan doing nothing to quiet the noise in my head. I kept replaying that conversation with Mark, word for word, tone for tone. The way he looked at me. The way his voice dropped when he spoke just to me. The things he said. And the things he didn't. You always looked like you had one foot in and one foot out. Why did that hit me so hard? Why did it feel like he'd peeled something open that I'd kept shut for years? I tried to brush it off. Told myself he was just being friendly. Thoughtful, maybe. But the words, they stayed. They nestled deep and refused to leave. And that scared me. Because I felt something I didn't want to name. It wasn't love. It wasn't desire. Not exactly. It was being seen. Being acknowledged. And that, after everything I'd been through, felt dangerous. I'd spent years in a relationship where I faded into the background. Where I gave and gave, only to be met with silence. Where I waited for someone to ask me how I was doing and actually mean it. But he never did. My ex, he had a way of making me feel like I was always too much and still never enough. And I stayed. For years, I stayed, thinking it would get better. It didn't. And when I came home, I thought maybe I'd find comfort. Familiarity. But all I found was the same cold distance I'd left behind. My father, with his clipped responses and unbending routines. My mother, floating through her day like she'd forgotten how to really connect with anyone. And me? I was just there, taking up space. Then Mark noticed me. Not with flowers or big gestures. Just words. Just attention. And it was enough to shake me. I told myself I was reading too much into it. That it was all in my head. That I was projecting, desperate for connection, for any kind of anchor. But then I started noticing things. Little things. How his tone changed when he spoke to me compared to everyone else. Softer. Slower. Like he wanted to linger in the moment. How he looked at me when he thought no one else was paying attention. Not in a vulgar way. Just intentional. And how he always seemed to find a reason to talk to me when he was over. A passing comment. A casual question. A longer than necessary glance. It wasn't every day. It wasn't constant. But it was enough. And I hated that I noticed. I hated that part of me wanted to notice. I started questioning myself. Was I making it up? Was I turning something innocent into something it wasn't? Or was I finally responding to something that had been there longer than I realized? And the worst part was, I didn't know which answer scared me more. I'd catch myself looking for him. Listening for his voice when he came over. Feeling a shift in the air the second he walked into the room. I started dressing differently, nothing too obvious, but I was aware of myself in a way I hadn't been before. And I hated it. Because I didn't want this. I didn't ask for it. I didn't even know what this was. But I couldn't deny the pull. The way his presence made me feel a little more alive. A little more noticed. Like I mattered. And then the guilt would come crashing in. This was Mark. My father's best friend. A man I'd known my entire life. A man who should have been safe, neutral, untouchable. And yet here I was, lying in bed, heart racing, wondering if I had imagined it all, or if he really was reaching for something more. I wasn't sure if it was me projecting, or if it was real. But either way, it scared me. After that barbecue, something shifted. Quietly. Gradually. Like a slow current pulling me out to sea before I even noticed I'd left the shore. Mark started coming around more often. At first, I told myself it was just coincidence. He'd always been close with my dad, helping him with projects, watching sports, the usual. But now it felt different. He never said anything out of line. Never crossed any visible boundary. But the air around us? It was charged. He'd linger in the kitchen a little longer after dinner. Find me on the porch while I read. Ask me how I was doing in that low, thoughtful voice of his. The way he listened, it unnerved me. Because it wasn't just polite. It was focused. Intentional. Like he wanted to hear more. Like he wanted to understand something about me that no one else bothered to notice. And I gave into it. We started having these conversations. Little by little. About books. Music. Old films. Things I hadn't talked about in years. He told me about his divorce. About mistakes he made. About things he wished he could undo. One afternoon, he found me in the living room, flipping through a book I hadn't touched since college. He sat down beside me, close but not too close, and asked what I liked about it. That turned into an hour-long talk about regrets. About feeling lost. About becoming someone you never planned to be. He said, sometimes you wake up one day and realize you've been sleepwalking through your life, and now it's too late to turn around. I felt that in my chest. Deep. Heavy. I told him I knew exactly what he meant. He looked at me in a way I'll never forget. Not pity. Not desire. Just understanding. And that, somehow, felt more intimate than anything else. Then came the night that changed everything. The house was quiet. My parents had gone to bed early. Mark had stayed late, helping my dad with something in the garage, then wandered into the kitchen while I was cleaning up. I didn't even hear him come in at first. He said, "Long day." I nodded. He held up a bottle of wine. "Thought we could share a glass. Unless you'd rather be alone." I hesitated. Just for a second. Then said, "Sure." We sat at the small table in the corner, 2 glasses between us, the lights low. The silence between us wasn't awkward, it was thick. Like there were things waiting to be said, but neither of us was brave enough to say them yet. He asked me about my writing, something I hadn't shared with anyone since college. I told him I used to write poetry. Short stories. But it all felt silly now. He shook his head. "That's not silly. That's survival." The way he said it, like he knew. Like he'd read a page from my private thoughts. Somewhere between the second glass and the slow unraveling of conversation, his hand brushed mine on the table. Just barely. I flinched. Not because I was afraid, but because I felt something spark. And I wasn't ready for that. He didn't apologize. He didn't make a joke or pretend it didn't happen. He just looked at me and held the silence. Then he said, "You feel things deeply, don't you?" I couldn't speak. My throat tightened. I nodded. He reached up, slowly, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. I didn't move. I didn't stop him. And, in that moment, I felt like I was standing at the edge of something vast and dangerous. A place I knew I shouldn't be. But still, I leaned in closer. It wasn't about the touch. It wasn't even about him. It was about being seen. Being wanted. Being understood. And for a moment, just a fleeting second, that feeling drowned out everything else: logic, guilt, fear. The weight of it pressed against my chest. Because deep down I knew. This wasn't harmless anymore. It was a Thursday. The kind of quiet weekday where time moves slow and everything feels suspended. My dad was out, had gone to pick up something across town, said he'd be gone most of the afternoon. My mom was working a late shift. I had the house to myself. At least, I thought I did. I was in my room, barefoot, sitting cross-legged on the floor, sorting through old notebooks, half-written poems, forgotten ideas. The window was cracked, letting in a breeze that barely moved the curtain. It was peaceful. Then I heard the doorbell. I wasn't expecting anyone. I padded down the hall, peeked out through the glass. It was Mark. I opened the door, a little surprised. He smiled, casual, easy, like this was nothing. "Hey," he said, "just passing through. Thought I'd drop something off for your dad." I nodded. "He's out right now." He hesitated, then shrugged. "No problem. Mind if I come in for a minute?" I should have said no. I should have made up something, anything. But I didn't. I opened the door wider and stepped aside. He followed me down the hall like it was routine, like he belonged there. I said I was working on something, offered him coffee, but he waved it off. "Don't want to bother you. Just a few minutes." I walked back into my room, expecting him to stay in the living room. But he followed me. At first, the door stayed open. Natural light spilled in from the window. He sat on the edge of the bed while I sat on the floor again, notebook in my lap. We talked. Nothing heavy, just small things. Writing, the past, music we missed. Then he asked if I ever thought about leaving again. I told him I didn't know. That some days I felt ready to run. Other days I felt like I couldn't even move. He looked at me for a long time. Then he said it. You've become something else. So mature. So grounded. So misunderstood. The words lingered, hung in the space between us like smoke. I didn't answer. And then, slowly, he stood up. Walked closer. Sat down beside me on the floor. He didn't touch me, not at first. But the space between us grew smaller. I could feel his breath. His voice dropped, low and careful. I don't think they see you, he said. Not the real you. And when his hand reached for my shoulder, gently, like he was asking without words, I didn't move. I didn't flinch. His fingers rested there, light, deliberate. My heart pounded in my chest, but I didn't speak. Couldn't speak. He turned toward me. Our faces were close. Too close. His eyes searched mine like he was looking for permission. And I didn't pull away. Everything inside me felt torn. Spinning. I wasn't thinking. I wasn't planning. I was just caught. Then my phone rang. The sound broke through the air like a crack of thunder. I jumped. I glanced down at the screen. Dad. I answered without thinking, putting it on speaker. Where are you? He asked. My throat tightened. My voice felt small. I'm in my room, I said. Alone. Mark froze beside me. There was a pause, just a second. Then Dad continued, something about picking up parts and being home soon. I barely heard him. I ended the call. Mark stood. Slowly. His expression unreadable. We didn't say a word. He walked to the door, opened it and left. And we never spoke of that moment again. But that wasn't the end of it. Not even close. After that day, everything felt strange. I avoided him. Didn't answer his texts right away. Didn't linger in the kitchen when I heard the doorbell. I kept to myself more, closed doors, turned off lights early, stayed in my room like I was trying to disappear. And still, the memory of that moment replayed in my mind constantly. Not because it was dramatic. Not because anything actually happened. But because something almost did. And that was enough to shake me. He texted a couple of days later. Just a casual, hope you're doing okay. Didn't mean to catch you off guard. Nothing flirty. Nothing inappropriate. But the tone, it was different. Careful. Controlled. Almost like he was pulling back, testing the waters before saying more. I replied, eventually. Just something vague. Yeah, I'm fine. Busy. I didn't know what else to say. I kept wondering if he regretted it. Or worse, if he didn't. And then my father started acting differently. Not about Mark. Not directly. But with me. He got shorter. Harsher. Criticized everything, from how much time I spent in my room to how I folded the laundry. He made these little comments about me, walking around like I didn't live here, or being too sensitive lately. Nothing specific. Just tension. Like he sensed something was off, even if he couldn't name it. And maybe that's what terrified me the most. That people can feel what they don't see. Mark didn't come by for a while. Weeks passed. Part of me was relieved. Part of me kept checking the driveway anyway. Then one afternoon, I walked into the living room and there he was. Sitting on the couch with my dad, talking sports like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't touched my face. Like he hadn't been inches from crossing a line with me in my own bedroom. I froze for a second. My breath caught in my chest. Then I forced a smile, nodded a greeting, and walked past them like I was just another person in the house. Later, I found him alone in the kitchen, pouring himself a glass of water. I didn't say anything. Neither did he. He looked up, met my eyes, and gave me the smallest, most practiced smile I'd ever seen. Polite. Hollow. Safe. And then he turned away. That was it. No explanation. No acknowledgement. No sign of the weight I'd been carrying around since that afternoon. I felt discarded. Like I'd opened a door, and he'd just walked away. Like he'd tested the boundary, seen how close he could get, and now that it scared him, now that it scared me, he had the luxury of pretending it never happened. But I couldn't pretend, because he took something with him in that moment. Not my innocence. Not my trust. Something more subtle. The belief that maybe, finally, someone understood me. And when he acted like none of it mattered, I started to wonder if maybe I never did. I spent so many nights lying awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every look, every word, every breath that passed between us. Trying to figure out what it all meant. Trying to figure out who I was in that moment. Who he was. What that moment made of us. And what it broke in me. Was I leading him on? Did I give off some kind of signal without realizing it? Or worse, did some part of me want to be seen that way? Wanted the attention, the warmth, the validation? I couldn't answer it. I still can't. And then I'd swing the other way. Think maybe it was him who crossed the line. Maybe he saw someone vulnerable, emotionally exposed, hurting, and he stepped in with just enough tenderness to blur the edges. Just enough kindness to make me question everything else around me. But the truth? The part that keeps me up? Maybe we both did something wrong. Or maybe neither of us did. Maybe it was just two broken people, reaching for something. Anything. Like mirrors. Reflecting back the pain we didn't know how to name. I started writing again. Not stories. Not poems. Just thoughts. Messy, unfinished, raw. Pages full of questions with no answers. My handwriting slanted and rushed, like I was trying to empty my mind before it crushed me. One night, I wrote, what if he didn't mean to cross a line? What if I didn't either? What if it was just a moment that wasn't supposed to exist, but did? Then another, what scares me more, the way he touched my face or the way I didn't stop him? I kept writing, trying to figure out if what I felt was shame or grief or both. And all the while, I kept thinking about the silence. There were so many moments where nothing was said, but everything was understood. Those silences? They were loud. They were full. And now, in hindsight, they feel heavier than the words ever could have been. Like that first night on the porch. Like the quiet pause between his compliment and my breath catching in my throat. Like the hallway glance that lasted too long. The hand on my shoulder. The strand of hair. We never said the thing out loud. Not once. But we both heard it. Felt it. Responded to it. And now that it's over. Now that he's back to pretending none of it happened, I keep wondering if I imagined it. If I filled in the blanks because I was desperate to feel something. But deep down, I know I didn't. Because no one imagines that kind of tension. No one imagines that kind of closeness. Still, I wonder if I was ever really the one in control. Or if I was just the perfect storm for someone else's loneliness. And maybe he was mine. What do you think really happened between us? Was it mutual? Was it manipulation? Or was it something else entirely? Something we don't even have words for? Because sometimes it doesn't feel like there's a villain. Or a victim. Sometimes it just feels like two people drifted into a space they were never supposed to share. And once they were there, neither of them knew how to leave. Have you ever felt that? Caught in that emotional gray area, where right and wrong blur, and all you're left with is confusion, and the sound of your own heartbeat? If you've ever stood at the edge of something you couldn't name. If you've ever felt seen by the wrong person at the wrong time. If you've ever walked away from a moment and carried it with you for years, let me know in the comments. I want to hear your thoughts. I need to know I'm not alone in this. And if this story stirred something in you, if it made you reflect or remember or simply feel, please take a second to like, share, and subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold. Because around here, we don't just tell stories. We open the doors to the ones no one talks about. And the truth? It's never simple. I've learned that some conversations echo for years. They don't fade with time. They just grow quieter until you're alone in the dark, and suddenly they speak again. Not every scar is visible. Not every mistake wears the name it deserves. And not every person who makes you feel whole belongs in your life. So be careful who you let into your silences. Because not everyone who listens is innocent.